Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Live here, and today we're reviewing for you Resident Evil Requiem on the Nintendo Switch 2. This review was originally written by the wonderful Ollie Reynolds and has been adapted for video by me. But anyway, that's more than enough waffling. Let's dive right into things. There's a moment during Resident Evil Requiem, in fact several moments, in which we laid the controller on our lap and just stared at the screen in awe. Over the last decade, the series has reclaimed its throne as the king of survival horror, but Requiem pushes the quality bar even higher than ever, presenting an experience that is equal parts fresh and nostalgic. For longtime fans who cut their teeth on the original Raccoon City trilogy, this is a love letter that celebrates the series' origins, one that will have you grinning from ear to ear until the credits roll. Requiem stars two playable protagonists, FBI agent and scaredy cat, that's Capcom's words not ours, Grace Ashcroft, and series veteran Leon Kennedy, who's still busy serving the Division of Security Operations. Together, well actually mostly separately, they work to uncover a bunch of mysteries linked to the Umbrella Corporation, with newcomer and excellent antagonist Victor Gideon driving the narrative. And make no mistake, Requiem's narrative is utter nonsense in the best way. The way it rewrites a lot of the series' backstory may drive a few diehard fans round the bend, but we loved every second. Resi 7 and Village, as good as they are, particularly the former, were so tangentially connected to the wider narrative that they could have been named something completely different, like Biohazard. That's a joke. Requiem is easily the most lore-heavy entry since Resi 5, one that goes back to corrupt corporations and deranged scientists while laying foundations for future games. However bonkers the story is, it is very well told, with some wonderful voiceover work from Nick Apostolides as Leon, Angela Santabolo as Grace, and Anthony Byrne as Gideon. Similarly, the music is consistently excellent, from the subtle, calming save room theme to the frantic numbers in the action sequences. The story bounces between Grace and Leon from start to finish, with key narrative beats signaling a character switch. That said, the first half largely belongs to Grace, with Leon concentrated primarily in the latter half. Grace's gameplay is the quintessential survival horror experience, focusing on limited inventory space, scarce ammo, and brutal, relentless enemies. Whilst I personally played on standard modern difficulty, Ollie played on standard classic difficulty, which brings back ink ribbons for Grace's sections, an additional limited number item that you'll need to save your progress. Naturally, being able to just put the Switch 2 in sleep mode without losing progress does somewhat nullify the need for the ink ribbons to a degree, but they do still offer severe consequences if you die, so their inclusion absolutely forces you to be more cautious. Crafting also returns, and here it's tied entirely to the collection of blood samples found throughout the environment or from your fallen foes. By holding A next to samples which tend to be around the sort of groin region for most enemies, Grace can use a dedicated item to extract the blood, with larger enemies providing a greater supply. By combining this with herbs and bits of scrap, you can create all sorts of useful items like med injectors, ammunition, steroids, and much more besides. And yes, empty ink ribbon tins can also be found in the environment, so you can craft full ink ribbons as well. Definitely handy if you find yourself in need of one. By having enemies provide essential blood samples, Requiem encourages you to kill them if you want to craft certain items. Like all great survival horrors, however, there are naturally downsides to this. If you leave your fallen enemies lying on the ground for too long, they'll morph into blister heads, a clear nod to Resident Evil Remake's Crimson Head zombies, which are generally much faster and more aggressive, and take a lot more shots to take down. You can mitigate this by using craftable hemolytic injectors to make their bodies explode, or if you're feeling particularly brave, you can sneak up on a zombie and use the injector instantly whilst they're up and about. Again though, it's yet another item that you'll need to keep handy whenever possible, taking up a precious slot shot in your already limited inventory. The balance is simply fantastic, and it makes for the purest survival horror experience since Resident Evil 7. But of course, that's just one half of the story. Leon's sections are a more direct evolution of the action horror seen in Resident Evil 4. Ammunition is much more plentiful, whilst the inventory system is a spin on the old attache case approach seen in Resident Evil 4 and Village, meaning you've instantly got a lot more space to play with. Enemies are also more plentiful, with the game often putting you in situations where you're forced to fight off waves of zombies. Roundhouse kicks are back, of course, and Leon can make use of various melee weapons, picking up spears and hurling them at distant foes, or turning the tables with his very own chainsaw. It's about time he got to wield one of those. In addition to these one-time melee weapons, Leon also has a dedicated hatchet that you keep sharp by pressing L and Y together. It functions just like the defensive knives in Resi 4, meaning you can either use the hatchet directly against enemies at close range, or indeed keep attackers at bay with context-sensitive button prompts popping up to save your skin at the last second. It's a great addition, and being able to sharpen it on the fly means you're not limited to restoring its functionality at in-game shops. The shops are indeed back though, although we can't show you any footage of it just due to the embargo limitations. It's just the way it is. There's no swashbuckling merchant in Requiem though. Instead, you'll come across dedicated crates with a multitude of new weapons, armor, and recovery items. Currency isn't located in the environment either, but rather accrued automatically by killing enemies. Leon's sections really encourage you to be as aggressive as possible, and you'll find you have credits in the tens of thousands in no time at all, letting you boost your arsenal very quickly. Much like Grace, Leon can also craft essential items, but given the swift nature of the gameplay, this isn't tied to the collection of blood. Instead, you need to head into the crafting menu and combine the ingredients you wish to use. Simple as. There were moments during Leon's sections in which the action gets dangerously close to the frantic gameplay seen in Resi 6. Thankfully, however, it never quite reaches the same heights, or lows if you prefer. Whenever things get a little bit too over the top, Capcom wisely pulls back to keep everything grounded. All told, by combining Grace's survival horror gameplay with Leon's much more action-focused affair, the pacing is pitch perfect. We simply never felt bored, and with a sprinkling of nostalgic Easter eggs throughout the latter half, which no, we're not going to spoil here, it made for one of the most exhilarating entries in the series' history. There's plenty of replay value as well. We're not going to go into exactly what's unlocked upon completion, which for the record took Ollie just under 12 hours and me just under 11. I was playing on an easier difficulty, I suppose. But needless to say, you'll have plenty of extra goodies to play around with to incentivize multiple campaign runs. You can also play around with the camera on subsequent playthroughs, or indeed your first if you wish. Requiem recommends playing Grace's sections in first person and Leon's in third, which we did on our first run through, but you can switch these around however you like for some interesting results. Sadly, there's no Mercenaries Mode here, which seems ridiculous given the fast addictive nature of Leon's sections, but it seems entirely likely that this could be added as DLC. On Switch 2 specifically, Requiem mostly runs very well. Visually, it often looks incredible, with the environments in particular being a true standout thanks to excellent lighting and shadow effects. Things falter slightly with the characters and items. Hair often looks a little bit dodgy, particularly at a distance, while items picked up in examines will sometimes have this off-putting aliasing around the edges. These are cutbacks that we didn't really notice with 7 and Village, and it's perhaps an indication of the advancements made with the RE engine for Requiem. Similarly, though frame rate is often gunning for a slick 60 FPS, there are moments in which it will become quite inconsistent when there's a lot going on, usually during specific scenarios in which fire is heavily present in the environment. In our experience, this tends to be more noticeable during handheld play, but even then, we wouldn't say it occurs often enough to dampen the experience. Ultimately, the Switch 2 can't provide the most technically advanced version of Requiem, but the fact that Capcom got it running as well as it does is not only commendable, but remember the size difference. This is a tiny little bean of a machine. It should never have looked this good. Resident Evil Requiem sets a new benchmark for a series that has been pretty consistently great for the last decade or so. By combining classic survival horror with the more action-focused gameplay of Resi 4, the result is an experience paced to perfection. Add in a lore-heavy narrative and copious Easter eggs, and you've got what might be the ultimate expression of Resident Evil. There are a few minor visual hiccups along with some inconsistency in frame rate during busier moments, but the fact that we've got a brand new flagship Resident Evil game running well on Switch 2 should be nothing but celebrated. The lack of a Mercenaries mode feels like a missed opportunity, but we've got two of our fingers crossed that it eventually shows up. Resident Evil Requiem, you're getting a 9 out of 10 from us. Now that the official side of things is done, you know what time it is. It's time for Alex's personal thoughts. I've got to be honest, my favorite Resident Evil game is 7, and so the Grace side of things here is just, like, absolutely outstanding for me. I loved every single second of Grace's gameplay. There was so much to dive into. The atmosphere, the movement, everything felt, you know, it's how it, in my mind, it's how it should be survival horror, you know? You should be in a situation where you feel like one zombie is a massive deal, even if you've got a gun. I love it. And then having that broken up with the Leon sections where you finally get to sort of breathe and take a breath, you know, suddenly the tension is still there, but it's just relaxed a bit, you know? And now you've got these guns and you feel like you feel like Superman bursting through the same environments, and whereas before it was creepy around the corner, I'm scared to, zombies die! It's just a delight. Having said that, the latter half of the game, which has a lot more dedicated Leon sections, just didn't work as well for me, which was quite disappointing. I missed the fear, the anxiety, because the Leon sections aren't really scary by comparison. You know, there's definitely an element of fear there, but when you've come from what I would consider to be probably the best survival horror experience I've ever had to, okay, now it's, you know, just sort of a long section with a load of guns and shooting enemies, and, you know, sometimes one will pop out, sometimes the lighting's a bit poor. It just doesn't hit the same way. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the Leon sections, I absolutely did, but the longer ones, I feel slightly, for me, outstayed their welcome. I spent a lot of the time just going, okay, I want to do more Grace gameplay. I want to do more Grace gameplay, but, you know, that's just me. I still feel that this is a fantastic game, and I can't argue with that side of things. I just found myself in a situation where I loved Grace's gameplay so much. Leon, when he was stuck around for a little bit too long, just didn't sort of scratch the itch I was looking for. As I said before, I just wanted to go back to Grace's gameplay because that is, I'm just gonna say it is the best survival horror experience I have had, bar none. Like, I love Resi 7, and that set a very high benchmark for me, but the Grace sections in this definitely overcome that. My god, they're exceptional. And the fact that the Switch 2 runs all this at 60 frames a second, and it's a reasonable 60 frames a second, it's nowhere near locked. And there are, you know, sort of sections where you will get like 30 or hovering around the 30s when, as Ollie mentioned, you know, there's like loads of fire on screen and stuff like that. But the fact that it's even aiming for 60 and the fact that it achieves it a good, you know, 85 to 90% of the time is just utterly outstanding. It's absolutely mind-boggling that it looks and runs as well as it does. I can tell other developers are going to be spitting teeth now that the bar has been raised so high for Switch 2.